My research focuses on the intersection of sports and race in St. Louis during the Civil Rights Movement. And so I think it's important to give some context as to what the Civil Rights Movement that didn't take place on an athletic field or basketball court looked like in St. Louis during this time. In reaction to liberation, official response to the Black liberation struggle in St. Louis, Missouri, written by Kenneth Jolly in 2003, discusses the relationship between activists, the St. Louis Black liberators, and local law enforcement during the 1960s. And so Jolly argues that these local incidents were part of a larger systematic and coordinated effort by federal and local law enforcement. And so he examines protests in the Black Power movement within the lens of the Cold War, shows how different national organizations and leaders were investigated by the FBI, and how communism and the civil rights movement were kind of interlaced. He uses many St. Louis newspapers, the Post-Dispatch, the St. Louis Argus, the Globe Democrat. He uses secondary sources about FBI's investigating activists and organizations. He concludes that there was increased scrutiny for organizations fighting for civil rights during this time, but responses and interactions between these organizations and political officials or government officials or police raised concerns about governmental abuse and showed that there were few ties between communism and the civil rights movement during this time. The St. Louis rent strike of 1969, Transforming Black Activism in American Low-Income Housing, written by Michael Karp in 2014, highlights the 1969 rent strike led by public housing tenants and how it shaped federal legislation and helped make housing a central concern of the Black freedom struggle. He also follows the lives of three key activists that participated in this rent strike: Ivory Perry, Reverend Buck Jones, and Gene King. So what he does is tell the story of the St. Louis civil rights movement through the lens of the rent strike, housing policies, urban communities, and also through the lives of these three key activists. He uses biographies, dissertations, Department of Health reports, St. Louis newspapers. He concludes that the rent strike placed issues surrounding low-income housing at the center of Black activism in the United States and in St. Louis. Between civil rights and Black power in the Gateway City, the Action Committee to Improve Opportunities for Negroes, 1964 to 1975, written in 2004 by Clarence Lang, discusses the origins and development of the Action Committee to Improve Opportunities for Negroes, also called ACTION, a group that used militant, nonviolent direct action to fight for additional rights and improve Black employment opportunities in St. Louis. He gives greater weight to the local movements and protests. He challenges the idea of the civil rights movement as an elite movement, narrowly focused. He argues also that the civil rights movement and Black power were not dichotomous. He uses newspaper articles from the Post-Dispatch, Globe Democrat, and he also uses Urban League research reports, interviews, and tapes as well. He concludes that the civil rights movement was contradictory in nature, meaning it had different meanings for different people at different times, and he highlights that the struggle for civil rights and also the Black Power movement should fit within a larger context in which he calls the Black freedom movement. All of these articles relate to my research because it places St. Louis in the center of the civil rights conversation. And so these articles tell the story of a national movement from a local grassroots perspective, which is what my intersection of sports, race, and politics in St. Louis will do as well.